Welcome to Cues and Views, first on the web for collecting English billiard cues. Welcome to Cues and Views' latest magazine piece. This one I'd like to focus on one of the overlooked aspects of billiards and snooker memorabilia collecting. I say overlooked by the majority of us and specialised in by a select few people. Now, I don't claim to be a massive expert on this area, however I have a mild interest, as I do with many aspects of the smaller end of billiards collecting. As you know, my main interest being cues. I have several books, videotapes, DVDs, magazine pieces, autographed items, and of course that eventually brings us round to one of the more ephemeral pieces, which is snooker or billiards chalk. Now, when I first became interested in playing the game, possibly 30 years ago roundabout, at that time Embassy, which was Imperial Tobacco, was sponsoring the World Snooker Championship, and they were in association with Powerglide, produced some chalk which was very nice and looked good and obviously had the Embassy logo, and I was lucky enough to get hold of a pack in original condition with the original box, and that would be to me worth something in the region of £10 to £15, maybe a tiny bit more, because it is an absolutely mint and pristine example. Now, I used to use this type of chalk. Here's a piece that's slightly used. Now, chalk collectors, one of the main things that chalk collectors look for is unused pieces of chalk, which, as you saw inside the box, is a full complement of unused chalk. Not long after that, the perennial subject of kicks came up, as we know, it's still being discussed today, and another manufacturer, which was LEP, brought out their own brand of anti-kick chalk. I think this was late 80s, early 90s. Again, that's a pristine example, has been slightly used, but I have a box that I bought from a friend of mine from Bradford with some chalk inside, and this has not a full box, but every piece is absolutely unused and mint, and obviously the packaging is incredibly bright, as is the label on the lid. So again, this is possibly worth around about £10. Nothing special in some ways, but it's a nice piece of memorabilia that I like to have. Reminds me of my, as I say, much earlier playing days, and is a pleasant item just to look at and to display on my shelves. Chalk has been used in billiards for many years, and there was a gentleman called Carr who claimed to invent the idea of using chalk. He called it special twisting chalk because it allowed for people to play screwback shots and so on, to get the cue ball to adhere to the tip and apply additional spin. Now, known as twisting chalk because some people who couldn't afford to buy chalk used to twist the end of their cue into a plaster wall and get residue from the plaster wall and then use that to play screw shots. So the game was in its infancy. That's quite so many years ago. Now, in more recent times, chalk has kind of evolved a bit beyond that. For example, I have here a silver chalk holder with a piece of chalk inside. Again, if you were fairly well-to-do, you would have that, and you would walk around quite proud of yourself, use your chalk occasionally. It's a minute status symbol, and this is in its original box. Again, worth possibly something in the region of £25 maybe. Still a nice thing to have. Again, additionally perhaps valuable because it has its original box. Now, to protect people's clothing from the dust from the chalk, many people have little chalk holders which have a press stud and a little piece of chalk inside, and then when you're not using it you cover it over, and therefore, as I said before, it protects your trousers. That's a very normal, quite used piece of chalk. In fact, I ought to go back to using that because that used to be one of mine, and it's quite nice. Made out of leather. Some of them are colourful, as in this one that I got from Martin Chesworth in Sheffield, and that's quite pleasant too. So the most commonly used chalk that we see is green triangle chalk, and again something in the region of 50p to buy. So you can see that semi-collectible pieces of chalk, you know, go up in value and are something of a collector's item of the future. When you go back in time, however, some of the more famous names, people like to see if they can get their hands on a brand that is well known, synonymous with quality. Many of the pieces you see here on the table in front of me are actually Burroughs and Watts chalk. Now, I can't claim that every one of them is totally unused. I mean, this little piece here, it's been used, but much of the label is there, and these are not common. This piece, again, you can hardly read it. It's a Riley piece, and it's got George Gray's name attached to it. Now, you may notice most blocks are cube in shape, square cubes. Many are round. I'll come back to that little one there, that little piece of cannon chalk, in a moment. Again, some of them are deeper than others. If you put them side by side, even if they're used or whatever, they are of a different height, therefore there's more chalk into some than others. Those two are Burroughs and Watts pieces, that's the Riley piece. And some of them are in little cardboard containers where you take the lid off, and again in your pocket to protect your clothing from the chalk. But people were very, very proud of their appearance, I think, back then. So you get a little thing. That's a Burroughs and Watts piece, as is that. Very nice. What would they be worth? Possibly around £35–45 each. The George Gray piece, I would say similar, even though it's in the condition that it's in, because you don't see it every day. And George Gray came here in 1911–1912. Just to put that into context, he was under contract to Riley's, and therefore it's a Riley product and it carries his name. Burroughs and Watts, every piece there is different, all Burroughs and Watts. This little tiny black one, again, it's an early form of plastic, possibly early part of the 20th century. Again, lovely little piece, beautiful, soft-ish plastic, you can squeeze it, it gives a little bit. Not like Bakelite, all hard and brittle. Lovely little thing. Possibly a promotional item, says Canon on it. I spoke to Peter Clare about this. He said he'd never seen a piece. Funnily enough, about a month later another piece appeared on eBay. So I saw two. I bought this off eBay. Again, I paid something around £26 for that. And again, it's just so dainty and lovely. I like that. So I've become a bit of a sort of a convert to the joys of chalk. Now, we talk about value and collectability of chalk. What I find amazing is that this box of chalk was on eBay, and this box of chalk is not complete. As you can see, there's spaces for two more. It's a Burroughs and Watts piece. I would give you a few moments to think about how much, if they were £35–40 a piece, how much it might go for if you had to pay another £20–30 for the box. So you're talking, what, £200 or £300 maybe for a box of chalk? You may be surprised to learn that this box of chalk actually finished something in the region of £1,500, which is a serious collectible. Just here I have a close-up of one of the pieces of chalk that was in the box. These pictures aren't mine, I saved these from eBay just to illustrate what the chalk was like, and again to jog my memory if I ever saw anything similar to it again. One other thing I have is another Burroughs and Watts box of chalk. This went for much less. So chalk collectors certainly know something that I don't know, because again, okay, there are a few less pieces. It's blue chalk as opposed to green. I gather that this is much less rare and therefore is worth nowhere near the same amount of money. So there we are, in a nutshell. That's chalk, and the vast variety of prices that you can expect to pay for chalk. Just in case you think that chalk stopped evolving, it's just chalk, it's just coloured chalk, just so it doesn't show up on the tablecloth cloth that much. This is something just come over from Thailand or China, and it's a slightly heavier oil-based chalk, so that it sticks to the more modern laminated tips such as Camuys and Phoenix and this kind of thing. This has been sold currently by Craftsman Q's, and I've been given a piece to try and a spare piece to keep, which that one is absolutely unused. And when I'm 104, that might be worth something in the region of who knows what. So that's chalk. Hope you've enjoyed that. It's just a small insight, a little snapshot really into an ephemeral piece of billiards history.